Welcome to Goldfish on Games, where today I want to talk about Blitz Basics, the beginner-friendly development environment that was not only a hit with bedroom coders, but it also powered a number of big-name games, and it's those that I want to mostly focus on in this video. So let's get started by getting dirty with skid marks. This is possibly one of the more well-known titles that used Blitz, being that it was developed and published by Acid Software in 1993, who just so happened to be the same company publishing Blitz Basics itself. Now I'm going to show off both skid marks and super skid marks for this one, as the sequel was very much built on the original, and in the best way, it's more of the same. The game is a top-down isometric style racer, with Super Off-Road feeling like the obvious inspiration here, but it also has Micro Machine vibes going on as well, as all the tracks are larger than the screen, with there being lots of scrolling around happening, with cars that might not seem like they're super detailed, but having a huge range of angles, so they move around very smoothly. The handling is a little arcadey, with jumps and bashing into the sides, and it lives up to its name by leaving skid marks on the ground as you move around. It's a game that does not take itself too seriously, as it supports multiplayer, and even more multiplayer modes in Super, that makes it a very good party game. And then there's all the additions to Super, like towing a caravan, or the cows. They were a big part of the magazine marketing at the time, and even graced the cover of the Mega Drive version. And all through this, Acid kept their ideals with this one, as they even provided some source code in the manual, and went over some of the technical details on how they used Blitz to make the game. Later versions also supported you making your own cars, and they provided tools for taking your 3D rendered images and turning them into sprites for the game. Now, while the original can feel a little slight with just 6 tracks, and an interface that, well, wasn't the best, they mostly solved all these issues with Super, as well as the additional packs that they released. Roadkill. Developed by Vision, with Acid once again handling the publishing in 1994. Now this was released just for the AGA machines, with even a CD32 release, which goes to show how versatile the language was. Now this is another top-down racer, but this has a much larger map that also scrolls around very smoothly. But there's some lovely parallax scrolling going on in the background, as it seems that we're on elevated tracks. Now I do think this is more for show than anything else, but it does look very cool. Now there's 12 tracks in total that we will race across, and we also have a choice of cars.
Good luck. You'll need it.
As this turns out to be a deathmatch style racing game. Now in the early levels, that means you'll have to collect missiles and try to destroy the other cars, or you can ram them into the kill zones that you'll find along the track every so often. And doing all this will give you more credits. But I was a little surprised to find out that all that money that you get, well, it's not really that important. You can't buy upgrades for your car, or even have to pay to repair yourself. It seems to be the equivalent of getting racing points. As you progress through the levels, you'll also have to deal with far more things, like ramps that can launch you, mines in the middle of the road, turrets that will try to attack you, So looking out for those armor pickups, or even having to go into the pits to repair yourself, is the way to go. Because all while you're doing this, you're going to have to deal with a driving model that, well, mostly works. But I do think it might be a little bit too slippery in how the cars move around. Which is where an upgrade system would have been nice, rather than the more limited pickups that you'll find instead. But this is more likely a skill issue with me, and I just need to get more used to it, as it can be quite useful on the very weavy tracks, with very tight corners that you have to deal with, that cross back on itself and even splits up in a few places. This game will constantly throw new things at you, and I think it's a great example of what you can do in Blitz.
Record time. Missiles. 2 million.
For those not in the know, Blitz Basics was a high-level programming language that was directly designed with the Amiga in mind. So not only did you have a very basic style syntax, but it also borrowed ideas from some of the more professional languages. And it helped expose the power of the Amiga in a user-friendly way. So this could be considered a competitor to Amos, but they both carved out their own niches. Now, similar to Amos, this had its own editor, and it could even compile executables so you could more easily distribute what you'd made. And it also helped that magazines like Amiga Format gave away a version of it for free, and then included tutorials on how to use it. Blitz continued to be developed for the Amiga community after it was open sourced and is now known as AmiBlitz. Penguins. Created by Scott Hain and published by Software Business in 1995, this is a puzzle game where you have to guide your little penguins to the exit. And if this looks strangely familiar, then your memory isn't playing tricks on you, as a year later this was given a new graphical treatment and released as Bograts under the Vulcan label. Now, trying to work out what a game is made in isn't always easy, and I've been using a few different resources to try and build up this list. Games published by Acid or have Blitz in its name makes things simple. But this one I wasn't too sure of, but there were hints with its data resources, as it has a number of files with shapes as its extension, which is a data format that Blitz commonly uses. Now, it could be something custom that they're just using the same name, but for now I'll take it. Now, in either version, you'll have to guide 2 kids to the exit, but you only get to do this indirectly. This means opening up blocks so they can walk out, or pulling a switch to deploy a ladder, so that the penguins or Bograts will make their way to the exit, and if you're lucky, they won't fall to their death or get stuck. But more often than not, it's you that get stuck on some of the levels, as they seem to be designed in a way that you can get down but not get back up, which is very annoying. Now, at the start those kids are quite passive, but as you continue you will find stuff that they can do. One can scare off creatures, and the other can pick up keys. So you might need to have to time your switch pulling with where they are, to try and actually complete the levels. It's quite the challenging puzzler, and I can see why Vulcan wanted to get involved. Blobz. Released in 1996 by Apex Systems, this was a bit of a handmade commercial release. But it's a lovely game that I've talked about before and had to include it here. One of the best ways to describe the game is that it's a faster Lemmings, as you have to guide the Blobz to the exit. But they don't walk, they run. And you have to be both quick and precise in telling them what to do. Even from the start, it lets you know that you're going to have to be on the ball here, as you have to jump the Blobz over the gaps, and there isn't much leeway. Now the abilities on each level are predefined, but instead of having a max number of uses, they instead use energy, with an indication on the HUD telling you how much they will use, but that energy will slowly recharge. But you do have to be careful when you start a new level, as the amount of energy that an ability costs you will be different from one to the next, which is part of the puzzle and the challenge.
Mission completed.
Now between each of the levels you get to move around the world map, and in some places you can have a choice of where you want to go, with the objectives changing from time to time as well. Now you might just have to get a minimum number of blobs to the exit, but you might also have to collect some crystals along the way, or even take out obstacles with missiles. And what makes all of this even more amazing is that so much of the software that was used to make it came from various magazine cover discs over the years. It really goes to show how important it was to include Blitz and Octamed and other packages onto the front of magazines like Amiga format. As while this might have got a limited release, it did get released. And it's a wonderful, if slightly manic puzzle game. Thankfully there is a slow-mo button that can help you out, and while that will slow down the blobs, it won't slow down the timer. That will continue down at its normal pace. So that just adds to the challenge here. And to cap it all off, they included a level editor.
Slow motion. Normal speed.
Acid really tried hard to get developers and hobbyists on board with the language, and one of the ways they did this was to release some smaller titles, mostly as cover disc games, like this version of Defender, that runs great and is a lot of fun to play, and it helped show how this was different to something like Amos, as while you can do some pretty amazing things with that language, it does have a bit of a reputation for not being quite as smooth or polished as what we're seeing here. Where Acid, they went to great lengths to not only show that Blitz was designed just for the Amiga, but it also made games that you couldn't tell what it was made with. And on top of all of that, they also included the source code for these games as well, so you could see how they were done. This means that if you wanted to make your own version of Zombie Apocalypse, you could just go check out the code and work out how they did it, as well as checking out the artwork that they provided. And while we will check out some more of the hobby work later on in the video, I think we've still got a few more commercial games to look at. Super Tennis Champs. Now this was developed by Mentor Software and released by Audiogenic in 1995, and it has quite a nice stylized look to it, and via the various data discs they also provided quite the range of characters for you to pick from. There's also a number of different courts to play on, and I think you can guess which type of game this is. Now it's no secret that I'm quite bad at sports games, as my many losses at Sensible Soccer on the cover disc face-off videos have shown, and I'm not much better here. The gameplay is more or less what you'd come to expect in a tennis game, but I was surprised to see that the screen moved around. Normally these are static. Now this was originally a PD game made in Amos. That Amiga format and power both helped push to Audiogenic, who quickly signed them up and then asked them to rewrite it in Blitz, as they said it would make it easier to add new features. Now amazingly, it seems that tennis games were quite popular with Blitz developers, as there was also Blitz Tennis. This was developed by Gernot Frisch, and was also released in 1995. You can tell that this was made with Blitz as it's in its title, or at least it was written on the discs, but the title screen and cover art might also have called it Center Court Tennis instead. There's a few different versions of it. Now this is a pretty competent, if not all that original or special take on tennis. If you play it on an AGA machine, you do also get some extra graphics and tweaks to the presentation. There was also a sequel a year later which was AGA only and continued with this upgraded presentation, with the characters now sporting this pre-rendered look. But is it me, or does the whole court look a little smaller and squished in? Like there's less room to play with. Now if you're a fan of sports games and tennis, then this appears to be a decent enough take on the sport, and it was very clearly made with Blitz Basics. Blitz Bombers. Now this was meant to come out in 1996 from Leading Edge, but they flew too close to the sun and the heat from Hudson melted their wings, and it was eventually released as freeware a few years later. Now it's not exactly difficult to see why. This was around peak Bomberman, and they barely made any attempt to make this legally distinct with its characters. Now when it comes to single player, things are a little basic. You select the level you want to play, and then you have a time limit to make your way to the exit. On some levels that might be it, but on others you might also have to collect keys, or might have to take out the monster generators. It's fun if not all that creative. Unlike the environments, I think they look great, and they were also very big on tunnels. You'll find these quite often on the maps, and they do act like any other square, as you can move around inside them and then drop bombs, but what they're really here to do is obscure your view, so you can use it to sneak up on other players. Or at least you can in multiplayer mode. In single player, they're a little less effective. What are also less useful and welcome in this mode are the power downs. Yes, there are pickups that will help or hinder you, like making the screen really bright or dark, or placing a new wall behind you. But these, as you can imagine, make the multiplayer side of things far more interesting. And well, it might make things harder for you to see what's going on, but it will also make it harder for everyone else. Now there's lots of options for the various different multiplayer modes, with bits that you can turn on and off, and this was clearly where they expected most people to spend their time with the game. And I think if this was released, it would have done quite well, because it was a very nicely done game, even if it was at the tail end of the Amiga. But I can see people trying to build their own 4-player adapters, as this would have been an absolute classic party game.
Yes. Yes.
Disclaimer.
Worms. Now there would have been comments if I didn't mention this one, as the original version was developed using Blitz Basics. That was before it was picked up by Team 17, and I believe that the large parts of the game ended up getting rewritten. Mostly so they could port it to all the many systems that it came out on. But I think there might still be hints of Blitz around in the original Amiga version, and I think it's being used even more with the director's cut. And it might go some way to explaining why the Amiga version does feel a little better than the other ports. Now I know that this isn't all the commercial games that were made in Blitz, as the various sites do conflict with each other on what was and what wasn't made using the language. But these are the ones that I think were definitely made in Blitz. But if you know more, please let me know in the comments, as I do think there's far more for us to look at. And I'd really enjoy making another video. But before we leave, I do want to look at a couple of very nicely done PD games that were also made with Blitz. And the first one is Tracker Hero. Now this came out in 2010. As you know what the Amiga was missing? A Guitar Hero clone. Now there are options for using various different modded controllers as well as other inputs, but all I had was the keyboard, which does not make this particularly easy. Thankfully there are a range of tracks with different difficulty settings, but you can also just import your own mod music. Which means I got absolutely hammered by a fast Zool track. I really didn't think that one through. Now one thing I will mention when using your own music, that it does get a little confused at times, and it can sound a little bit odd. Now I think it might be when tracks loop that it has problems, but I think it's quite amazing that you can just drop your music in and it will mostly just work at all. So this is quite an impressive bit of software that you can find on itch.io. Alien Fish Finger. Bit of an odd name, but this one came out in 1995, being developed by Skull Army. A game that I've only recently learned about from a cover disc. Now this is a sort of platform shoot 'em up, as you have to infiltrate various bases, where there's lots of people that are trying to stop you. Now the graphics have this classic Amiga vibe to it, with a very PD shareware feeling to it, with all the bloods and everything going on. Now enemies will drop icons that you can collect to power up your weapons, which will come in handy as you go, and there's also bombs that you can collect and throw. Now these are your main weapons that you can also use to dig out parts of the ground, in a Worms or Lemmings style, and in some places you'll need to do that to make progress with the game, as you continue to work your way through the caves and bases, taking on UFOs and other weird and wonderful creatures. It's an impressive game that got released as freeware after a few years, and it even got a decent number of patches and improvements in that time as well. And I think this might be a good place to leave the video. Now I might have to return to Blitz again, just to cover the wide range of PD and shareware games that was made in it, as there's some really interesting ones that we've not seen yet, and I'm sure there's far more commercial Blitz games to check out as well. And as always, if you know of some of them, let me know in the comments, or if you had a favourite among this lot, let me know as well. And before I go, I would like to thank you for watching the video. And I have to give a shout out to my awesome Patreons, who you can see on the screen right now. Now they got to see this video a week early and ad-free, as well as getting to see sneak peeks of what's coming up in the future. And if any of that sounds good to you, then you can even join them for free. There will be links in the description. So until next time, I was the Goldfish, that was the power of basic Blitz Basics, and this was Goldfish on Games.